Hi, Willie Days here with Kumiko, the ancient Japanese art form that'll make you forget your friends, your family, and your sense of time. Are you tired with furniture that's just too easy to put together? And do you have a burning, unexplainable, borderline concerning obsession with triangles? Well, you're in luck. With Kumiko, you get handcrafted wooden art that's part puzzle, part meditation, and all perfection. Each piece is lovingly carved, painstakingly aligned, and designed to make you say, wow, how did they do that? This beautiful piece could be yours for just $40. But wait, don't touch that remote. If you call in the next 25 minutes, we'll slash that price in half. That's right, only $19.95. And because we like you, we'll throw in this bonus piece absolutely free. You get all this craftsmanship, all this tradition for just $19.95. But you gotta call now. Supplies are limited, triangles are not. Call 1-800-KUMIKO now. That's 1-800-586-456-669. Operators are standing by, probably cutting wood. If you're like me and you're just getting into Kumiko, then you've probably come across the Asanoha or hemp leaf pattern. And before we even dream of making a full wall pattern, it's important to get the basics down. So today I'm going to break down the specific steps to make the Asanoha pattern, cover some common pitfalls, and share a few tips I've learned along the way. So let's work it. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to quickly cover off on supplies. To start, you're going to need your favorite saw and an 1/8" chisel to dimension the stock and create the frame. You're going to also need your Kumiko blocks and a big old chisel to cut those little pieces, and it doesn't hurt to have a couple common supplies like a pencil and a gentle persuader. And of course, it all starts with the actual Kumiko stock. These are 1/8" thick slats of basswood that I cut myself, which is why they're a bit rough. To start, we need to create the backbone, or the skeleton for our pattern. This is an interlocking square frame created by a series of half joints that, when put together, create a rigid structure where all the other pieces can fit in. For this simple 3x3 frame we're making, this means cutting 3 equidistant notches into 6 pieces of stock, but it's not tricky to see how you'd scale this up if you wanted. And all I'm doing here is using my best judgment to cut 2 perpendicular grooves halfway through the stock before taking that 1/8" chisel to hog out the notches. Not surprisingly, my best judgment wasn't perfect. I'll talk about this a bit later in the video, but I will say this was more art than science. But by the end, you should have something that resembles a window and pretty solidly locks together. At this point, we get to turn our attention to actually filling the frame, which means math. The first pieces are relatively easy. All we're trying to do is bisect a right angle, so I don't think I need to divide 90 by 2 for you, but it does get a little more challenging later. This was my first real opportunity to cut Kumiko pieces using my new jigs, and I definitely learned some things, but altogether, I think it went pretty smoothly. This is the full, unedited video of me making a single piece, which took about half a minute. You'll notice that I'm using a screw as a stop. That's because I naively made the pieces too long to work with my regular stop, so that's a whoopsie. And besides the angles, length is really what I'm paying attention to. Too long and the pieces won't fit, too short and they won't fit and never will. But with a little bit of trial and error, you can get a nice snug fit and have these pieces stay put. To complete this pattern, we'll further subdivide each triangle into 3 mini triangles. The process doesn't change, but we're talking more math. Like a lot more math. Like a stumping amount of math. Eventually, I just decided that 6 degrees was my number, before learning that it was definitely not my number. But fortunately, all I had to do was switch to using the 30-degree block and proceed to dial in my lengths. Reflecting on it, I'm pretty confident that 30 or 60 degrees is not the right number for this 3-way meeting point, but it worked. The challenge with this section is that you're trying to make 3 pieces perfectly meet up and pressure fit together. Oh, and there's not radial symmetry, so it's actually 2 types of pieces, and none of the pieces have the same angles on both ends, which is pretty flat angles, so it's easy to have the pieces blow out on you. And then I cut myself. But with a little blood, sweat, and tears, we eventually got there. At this point, all I've done is create one of the 8 sections. And the last step is to mass produce before putting it all together. One of the things I underappreciated going into this is actually how many pieces are involved in a piece. In total, we're talking 6 pieces for the frame, 4 for those large cross beams, 16 of these, and 8 of our little guys. Which also meant that I used way more basswood stock than I was expecting. According to my calculations, somewhere around 271 centimeters, or a little over 8 feet. Per usual, I do want to spend a couple minutes on some of the imperfections. Besides getting a bit of blood on it, the biggest thing that I noticed is the pieces just didn't quite fit together perfectly, particularly for the frame. Not only did I have several blowouts on the ends, but my notches weren't deep enough, so the piece wasn't flat to begin with, and the amount of banging that I did tells me it's probably not perfectly square either. Ultimately, this is the reflection of a fast and loose process for cutting the frame, and even a couple percent here and there can really start to throw things in whack. I didn't film much, but I quickly made a smaller Asanoha pattern using a hexagonal frame, mostly because I wanted to practice, and if you Google Asanoha, this pattern comes up as well. And here, the small size really amplified my struggles to get everything exact and well-fitting. But, to the naked eye, and if you don't get too handsy, it's a nice piece. And, like I always say, you gotta start somewhere. So in the next episode, I'm going to continue exploring some of these new patterns and work on ways to make my process more accurate and efficient. So subscribe, and I'll see you next time.